a joint committee with our medical issues and research and statistics. I'm sure some of you are members of both, but it's always fun to collaborate. And I think we'll start out with some announcements. We have the IIBC conference coming up in September, so that's exciting. So, any other announcements from our IIBC staff?
Yeah, so regarding the convention, our early registration rate ends at the end of the day on Monday, July 13th. So if you aren't yet registered, strongly encourage you to do so to secure the lowest possible rate. And the room block is available until September 4th or until sold out. Sounds like we are a little over 50% of the way picked up for those rooms, so get in while you can. And on August 5th at 1 o'clock Central, the IIBC is hosting a dive-in discussion on annual reports. It is a virtual meeting and free to IIBC members, so I just popped a link in the chat if you're interested in joining us then. And that is all I have. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you, Brianna. Does anyone else have any announcements that they would like to share before we get started with our speakers?
I'll just take the research and standards side. Uh, we again we've got convention coming up, and we have the Monday, September 28th time slot, 9:45 a.m. and we're planning a panel on presumptions that was, delayed from the previous meeting, and so I'm excited to finally get that underway.
Excellent. Anyone else? All right, well, today we have a presentation for you, and I have to give Stephen all the credit for getting this put together. I'm very excited about it. It's credentialing standards and regulatory alignment. And I'll just leave it at that and let our speakers take it away. And I want to welcome today Carol Kurtz, Blair Ilsley, and Andy Shade. They can tell you a little more about their background and where they're from. But Carol, are you starting us off today?
I think Andrew is.
Okay. Andrew or Andy, go ahead. Take it.
Yeah, sure. I can start us off. My name is Andrew Shade. You call me Andy. Director of Network Operations with Coventry Healthcare Workers Comp. We're a large workers' comp auto specialty network. So we have our own challenges in the credentialing world, specifically around some of the comp regulations. I've been with the company for like 24, 25 years now. Really kind of got my feet wet through pharmacy and came up through. I've been in the credentialing world since I think like 2010, really learned a lot about the regulatory pieces, the state requirements and such. What I'm really prepared to present on today are challenges, to be completely honest with you. We're entering a new age, okay, within the world itself, but especially within healthcare tech. And we're seeing a lot of integrations with AI, things like that, that really is designed to make process more efficient and effective for folks. But I think, holistically speaking, the problem is much bigger than process. Regulations, specifically, NCQA regulations, seem to be a little bit cumbersome at times. State regulations, they are what they are, right? I don't know that we'll ever get into the arena of policing the states and trying to get them to do what we want them to do from a credentialing perspective, or even applying standardization. For the most part, though, a lot of states are hands off. They'll have maybe their insurance requirements, things like that, certain requirements here or there. But for the most part, from a national perspective, standards are relatively static, with just a little bit of the state nuance. I did put together a little bit of a presentation that I'd like to just kind of share with the group about the start of about the credentialing process. So if I have the opportunity to share some content here, I would like to do that. And again, my focus today is really the current state of credentialing. The current state of credentialing in all, really, we're talking about an overview of processes and the starting line. The starting line is typically the most challenging of the credentialing process, and the starting line being provider applications. Specifically, the quality and accuracy of the information contained within remains the most significant pain point. Some of the challenges that we see are having to chase information that simply is not verifiable, such as an incorrectly selected specialty or program type. Practice and location demographic data tends to be stale and poorly managed, thus creating requirements that really don't exist. This is something that we see day in and day out within our credentialing area. And I know that it's not a problem that's unique to us because of the application information we're using is coming from CAQH, which most other orgs are also using. The data within CAQH is a little misleading in some instances, such as specialty. And I feel like, and we have had conversations with CAQH about this. The way that they list their specialties is actually an iteration of specialty plus focus. Translation with NCQA sometimes is difficult because NCQA is telling us you have to verify what the providers put on their application. But if they put something that's incorrect on their application, we have no way to verify it or fully credential that provider. Practice and location demographic data, again, this is very stale data in a lot of cases. What we've found is that you have provider groups who typically a provider might practice with 3 or 4 different groups. And as a result, they might have 3 or 4 credentialing contacts that are going into CAQH and constantly adding information, updating information, but never really removing information. And that's, again, a pain point in the sense that now we're creating a requirement to verify a license or a DEA in a state that the provider, quite frankly, might not have been practicing in for the last 5 years. So the starting line of the pain points continues to be provider applications and the inconsistency of the data contained within. Now we get into the race. So if we get past the starting line, we have a good application. Now we get into the race. And the race is actually the primary source verification, which remains the most critical piece of provider credentialing. In certain instances, the verification results that we're able to obtain through primary sources differ from the information that might be entered on a provider's application. This really creates, in my opinion, one of the biggest provider abrasion points within credentialing, because we're now required to reach out to the provider to have them provide an update to that application. We need your application to match what the verification results say. We send a request, please update your application, reattest to it. Somewhat insignificant changes like this happens repeatedly throughout the day, every day, at a provider's office level. Multiple organizations are finding the same issue when it comes to the credentialing. They have to get this one piece of information updated, which requires an update. And quite frankly, request after request, it leads to information fatigue. And I think at that point, a lot of these provider groups really become non-responsive to updating the information, thus not allowing us to actually complete the credentialing for that provider. The judges. So the judges, right? In any race, you have a start line, you have the race, you have a finish line, but then you also have the judges. NCQA is the widely accepted source for credentialing standards. In certain instances, NCQA has more moved towards a new age credentialing realm, as indicated with this credentialing system control policy update in 2025. In other instances, such as the recent proposed update requiring a provider to sign an attestation if they simply provide an updated insurance policy, takes a step backwards. This is the area where I feel like better guidance really could be helpful from an industry perspective. We understand what the standards are. We also understand that there's still a common sense element of it. And if I run a verification and the verification proves that the provider completed their education and training in internal medicine, but the provider incorrectly listed a different specialty on their application, an application update at that point simply shouldn't be necessary. We should be able to take the verified information and use that. I think some of the more nuanced NCQA stuff is working within a gray area. Not everything is black and white. What is our ability or how far within that gray area are organizations allowed to work? I know from my experience, certain organizations really err on the side of caution when it comes to that gray area and the NCQA standards. Other organizations might be a little more aggressive in saying, well, it's not clear, so we're going to do it as aggressively as we can until we get caught, right? I think that, having a little bit better balance from an NCQA perspective really could be helpful in allowing us to complete more of these credentialing requests with less outreach to the provider community. All in all, I think simplification might be something worth looking at from a standards perspective. And then last but not least, the conclusion. So this is the end of the race, and the current state of credentialing, in my opinion, is in transition. New age tech and tools, the primary source verification process is going to remain the most critical stage of the race. This is where fraud and we all see it in the news, providers practicing without the correct degree, things like that. Alignment of legitimate provider specialties and training programs within CAQH and application sources is going to reduce the opportunity for a provider to make an incorrect and unverifiable selection, right? Let's start by cleaning up the sources of the data and apply some structure to it in a way that we're only listing valid medical specialties, valid training programs, right? And if an opportunity does exist where perhaps on CAQH, a specialty is listed internal medicine, diabetes. Let us use our common sense to say that's not a legitimate program. The verification really should only point to internal medicine. More so, integrations between application sources and the AMA AOA really could provide secure provider benefiting results. I guess I'm looking at things in a way is how can we nationally tie things together into a better data source file that organizations can use that in turn is going to eliminate the abrasion that the provider community is feeling from the information request overload. So that's kind of where I'm looking at the state of credentialing, right? It is really in transition. How do we leverage this, but how do we leverage it in a smart way that's truly benefiting, not just to the organizations, but especially to the providers and their community as well? And that is what I have to present. I'm going to stop sharing here. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to talk through anything.
If not, I think we've got Blair set up next for a bit of a regulatory perspective.
All righty, let me get my slideshow set up here. I will take the reins on sharing my screen. Andy, I think I need you to stop sharing first. All righty, let's give this a go. Give me just a moment here, find my right tab. All right, here we go. Just want to confirm that everyone can see my screen okay. All right, I see some head nods. So Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you, Christy, for inviting me here. Sorry, my computer just froze for a moment. My name is Blair Ilsley. I am the supervisor of provider education in the Colorado Division of Workers' Compensation, and I am here to discuss provider credentialing from a regulatory perspective, specifically discussing how we can approach educational opportunities and credentialing in Colorado, and just kind of briefly touching on why a unified national standard really is such a challenge. All right. So taking a look into the state-by-state variations, I'd like to quickly compare how some jurisdictions offer guidance for medical care and evaluating permanent injuries, because this, as far as Colorado goes, is something that is quite unique for us and really highlights our need for offering credentialing within our regulatory environment. So as a start here, we've got our clinical practice guidelines. And so a lot of other states in the United States have adopted ODG. And us in Colorado, we create our own medical treatment guidelines. We provide these guidelines free of charge on our website, which is quite in stark difference to the ODG guidelines. And we have an entire dedicated unit that builds these guidelines based on independent medical literature reviews that tailors specifically to our state's workforce that covers the most common and most costly injuries. This is something that providers usually have no experience with. And with the fact that Colorado is so unique and that we write our own, they really would have no opportunity to receive training elsewhere regarding the medical treatment guidelines. I'm talking all the way from the fact that they even exist to how to use them in practice. Another topic that we are quite different on that really leans into the necessity for us to have our own regulatory training is we necessitate the use of the AMA Guides 3rd edition compared to many other states use the AMA Guides 6th edition. Really, these two things are just two items that are big differences from Colorado from the rest of the United States, but I really want to zero in on the state-by-state credentials and how we have the opportunity to teach our providers these hyper-local requirements. And I can do best so by zooming in on our system here in Colorado and how we offer credentialing. So in Colorado, we have 2 levels of accreditation. We have our own accreditation program kind of as an umbrella. It's a 2-tiered program that is tied directly into our state statute. So the accreditation program is administered by my unit, the provider education unit. And our philosophy is quite simple. We exist to create quality healthcare delivery system focused on the recovery of injured workers in Colorado. So why do we do what we do? We know that medical providers are highly trained in their specific clinical specialties. We do not teach folks how to be a chiropractor, how to be a dentist. We teach them how to apply their knowledge within this very specific regulatory environment. These folks are usually missing the administrative and legal knowledge required to be successful within our system. We are regulated by a ton of special rules, and they probably are not familiar with them. Really, the only types of providers that we see that come with a baseline knowledge are our occupational medicine physicians. And that is quite a small subset of the amount of the types of medical providers that we interact with. Our system really requires us to have the full gambit. So we offer level 1 accreditation. That is our baseline foundational program that we offer essentially to almost all credentialed medical providers in Colorado, all the way from chiropractors to physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, acupuncturists, athletic trainers, everything in between. So our level 1 accreditation focuses on getting into the system. So this is basically assuming that somebody has no, as far as a medical provider goes, has no experience within our system. And we walk them through a claim starting from beginning to end. So an injured worker gets an injury on the job all the way through full recovery or reaching maximum medical improvement. There are some foundational concepts that we teach there, including maximum medical improvement and causation. All wrapped up in that, we teach all about our unique rules that govern our system, specifically the use of those Colorado medical treatment guidelines. Our second offering is level 2 accreditation, and by statute, this is strictly limited to physicians, so that's MDs and DOs. It focuses entirely on teaching these physicians how to perform permanent impairment ratings. Permanent impairment ratings are a pivotal portion of our workers' compensation system, and it is of the utmost importance that we are offering a standardized training to kind of get all of these physicians on the same level. We know that being able to have physicians who render accurate and fair impairment ratings reduce the amount of litigation and truly the amount of heartache that these injured workers are dealing with as they are going through their injury. Level 2 physicians are the only type of medical providers in Colorado who have the authority to calculate those permanent impairments. Just wrapped up with both of those courses, it's not a one and done type thing. Each of those levels of accreditation is good for 3 years, but we want to ensure that our providers are staying up to date with any sort of changes that are going on. The Colorado DOWC is constantly innovating and updating rules in order to make sure that the system is fair and working for everybody as best as possible. So in order to do so, we offer these reaccreditation programs. So every 3 years, they come back, they take new material where they can learn these, kind of get a refresher on these key topics, as well as the opportunity to find out about updated rules that will directly affect them. So now I want to talk about, so I talked a lot about our program and what we do and how we do it. I'd like to talk about shift gears here to the operational reality of what it takes for us to run our program, because it's quite large and involved. And we understand, it's certainly clear to me that this might not be a program that could be applied to other jurisdictions due to a variety of reasons. So managing our entirely customizable and independent state mandated accreditation program introduces a lot of administrative and systemic challenges for us. So first and foremost, the creation and the maintenance of our material is a monumental task. We fund, design, and build our own curriculum completely in-house. Our audience is a broad range. You heard me mention athletic trainers all the way to physicians. So we have to make material that applies to all of these types of medical providers. And it's very challenging in order to offer material that is rigorous enough, that keeps everybody academically stimulated, as well as invested in learning and actually retaining the material. I also mentioned our reaccreditation every 3 years. As I said, we don't reuse material. We rebuild it every 3 years to encompass the new changes, as well as recapitulations of topics that we frequently see issues on, like in Christie's group. If we see something, if we're alerted to something going on there with Rule 18, we'll take that and we'll put it into our material in an effort to kind of head off these issues that we're currently dealing with. And our day-to-day operations, and that's just kind of our big projects, and our day-to-day operations are massive as far as a customer service standpoint. So I think Andy had mentioned folks registering. We deal with similar issues all the time where people offer inaccurate information in the registration form, including they gave us the wrong license number, for example. They gave us the wrong email address, the wrong telephone number, and that introduces large administrative burdens in an effort to kind of keep up with these folks and make sure that they are staying compliant and they are able to be accredited. Providers also change medical licenses where they jump from one type to another, and being able to keep track of those is a huge task. We don't have anything in the background that connects our accreditation program to an active medical license. As reason may stand, you can't be an accredited provider if you don't have an active medical license. And so keeping those two things tethered is quite challenging. We're also constantly monitoring expiration dates. We talked about those, the 3-year reaccreditation program. It's really it's quite the task to chase down these medical providers and remind them, hi, you are due to reaccredit. We need you to come and take this course, let alone having them register, having them pay, having them get into the learning management system all the way through completing our course, which are offered all online. And that's all if we have updated contact information for them. We try our best, but right now we don't have a unified database in the background that allows folks to change information themselves. So we are in charge of keeping track of everybody's contact information, which frequently changes, especially as medical providers move from one practice to another. We're also the sole servicers for our learning management system. So our team has to stay agile in between doing these projects, offering this customer service, and being able to drop everything we're doing and service the learning management system should we run into technical difficulties, which if anybody has taken an online course, you know technical difficulties exist. And then last but not least, something that's extremely unique about our group, which I would understand is probably quite a barrier to other regulatory agencies, is we have our own operating budget. And that gives us, that's not a barrier for us, but I understand how that can be a barrier for other groups. We have the gift of resources in creating, maintaining, and administering those courses. And that includes purchasing software. Software is expensive. We have the ability to make beautiful content online and purchase higher quality learning management system for our students to be able to have like a great experience, because people don't want to come back if they take your online course and it's miserable. And within that budget, we have the ability to contract with specialized multimedia professionals to make top of the line e-learning management, e-learning modules, as well as SCORM and MP4. So these challenges and considerations certainly present barriers to other states who want to implement something similar. And administering this provider education program really is a continuous lift, but it's well worth it. Colorado's system is wonderful, and we get a lot of really great feedback about the ability for our providers to serve the injured workers of Colorado at a higher level because of our accreditation program. And that is it for me about accreditation in Colorado. I'm happy to answer any questions about our program or anything like that. And thank you all so much for your time today.
Thanks, Blair. That was great, and always love working with Colorado system in general. We'll let people think on questions a bit. We'll keep moving forward, and maybe we'll have everyone having questions at the end will work out well as well. Next up, Carol was kind of on the forefront of the national efforts to standardize, and learn some more about that. It'd be great.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you guys asking me to have me here. Before I get started, Christy did ask Julian if you're on mute, maybe start taking yourself off mute. Christy did ask if I would like to introduce the other two participants from AAPAN. So first, Julian, I will start with you. I can't see everybody. I know you aren't on camera before. Julian Roberts is the president and CEO of AAPAN. Those of you that are not familiar, I think you probably are. I know Lisa Ann has been part of the organization for quite some time. But we are a 501c6. Our members are TPAs, network care management organizations, and we cover the gamut of lines of business or product, commercial, workers' compensation, Medicare, Medicaid. And I'm going to pause there for a second and see if Julian would like to give a minute and a half of AAPAN or himself.
No, just thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you guys today. And we have been a member for a couple of years, and definitely appreciate the partnership to work with you guys and be a part of your organization. And will not take up any additional time.
Awesome. Thanks, Julian. Also on the line with us today is Allison Woods, who was our credentialing operations analyst for AAPAN. She refers to herself as Carol Jr., which I don't know if that's good or bad, but Allison really does on a day-to-day basis run our Credentialing Alliance, which this is not about, but it is really about what Steve asked me to do, is really kind of talk about the shared credentialing concept, what we've learned from it, what we know about it, suggestions, opportunities, challenges, And so that's really where I focused my presentation.
You know, one of the many things that we look at as a organization and being a nonprofit and being a part of the industry is not only looking at legislative and regulatory impacts across the country, but also looking at opportunities that we can simplify processes. So there are, and of course, Carol's title as being VP of Administrative Simplification. Her primary role is to look at opportunities to not only eliminate friction between organizations and the provider community, but also how can we eliminate some of the costs that exist out there. So some of the concepts that Carol will be sharing will be looking at some of those concepts that we have looked at and evolved truly in some situations in collaboration with the provider community to see how we can streamline and lessen that friction. As you can imagine, provider friction is at an all-time high. Eliminating the friction in credentialing is definitely one area, but there are many others to look at and to address as we continue to move forward. And hopefully Carol can take you through some of the things that we looked at as we put together a solution for the industry that it is not a product necessarily of ours. It is more of a concept that we coordinate and manage on behalf of the industry from that perspective. So I'll turn it back over to Carol, and hopefully she can take it from here.
Steve, thank you so much, and my apologies for my technical challenges. As Julian mentioned, he gave me the longest title of the world, Vice President of Administrative Simplification. I joke I need a 5x7 business card to actually be able to cover that. But it is, make fun of it as I do, there is a lot of simplification that can be done in the healthcare industry. And really that's where we try to find it. So good news, bad news, we've had the opportunity of interacting with provider communities and asking about really kind of what's something that we can do to try to adjust that or address that, as well as working with our association members on challenges that they see. About 11 years ago, in working with some providers, we learned that provider credentialing was one of their biggest pain points. And what I would say is we found two types of providers. One was a provider that didn't understand the NCQA 36-month cycle requirement, or the fact that they needed to be recredentialed once they joined a network or a program. And those that understood it, but didn't understand why it couldn't happen all at one time. So because of that, we did create a credentialing alliance, which some of this really is building upon and using it as a case study. If I think about shared credentialing, the concept, Steve, do you mind sticking it on the, moving up a slide? So the shared credentialing concept is, thank you. Truly these are basics, and I don't mean to be overly minimizing this, but shared credentialing really does say a common provider credentialing application required documentation. If we can help the provider understand that this is really the packet that is needed, then it allows them to have a better understanding of it and allows us to have a standardized process. Also coming up with a single primary source verification process so that we're not duplicating efforts. So if we primary source verify one time, we identify any red flags, the overall group sites need to be identified, and making sure that that primary source verification takes into account any federal, state, or product requirements. Again, as I talked about, the association members we have with AAPAN, as well as our alliance members, they do cover all types of products and lines of business. So as we're looking at primary source verification, and you guys are looking to try to combine that, making sure that you're taking into account any of those specifics based on the product or the line of business. Shared credentialing is also consolidated provider outreach. both Andrew and Blair touched on it in different ways. As an industry, we are reaching out to that provider so many times, and it's actually getting more and more now that continued state and national directory data requirements and attestations are in place. So if you look at kind of a day in the life of a practitioner, there's a lot of times that you're being reached out for the same information at different times. And ultimately, it's negatively impacting the time that you can either take care of patients, file appropriate injured worker documentation, whatever you need to do. They don't really need to be outreached this many times. Shared credentialing also, in our opinion, includes an aligned recredentialing date, which comes back to, again, reaching out to that provider one time on behalf of many versus many times on behalf of one. And also you can have some shared cost, file processing fees and PSV fees where applicable. Specifically, one call out I will make is we understand that National Practitioner Data Bank does not allow us to share in that cost for primary source verification or pull of the profile. So where we can share those fees, we absolutely do. Where it's not something that we can, it can't be. One of the things I will say also as I kind of move into this next phase is I've approached this really from a focus of the true provider credentialing process. Blair, I think you came at it from a slightly different perspective of accreditation versus credentialing, but I do think there are parts of kind of verifying and maintaining and assisting with the accreditation part that can be part of credentialing. This slide really is lessons learned. Looking back at, as I mentioned, we've been doing shared credentialing or aligned or alliance credentialing for in place about 10 years now. What we see is it can work. I spend a lot of time talking to prospective new clients about the value and the process and the fact that we do have a decade under our belt of showing value and showing that providers get happier. There are substantial savings cost. A couple of things that I just from a perspective of what gets saved. One of our organizations represents to me about they save about $250,000 to $300,000 in a year on just the actual file credentialing piece by all of this that can be saved. That does not account any cost savings that may be there based on the process being more routine and simple. Another one of my case studies tells me that it's about a $40 per file savings, again, not taking into account any staffing. Also, the savings, if they wanted to do more involved API, more of the staff savings can come down on that as well. But definitely substantial cost savings has been seen across the board. Improved provider satisfaction and adherence. Another word is provider engagement. Because providers aren't impacted every other month, it seems to them, for some organization coming back to get their credentialing documentation, they can then pay better attention when somebody is asking them to, in the case of Blair, make sure that their accreditation is up to date and done every 3 years. So if you're reaching out for that, at least it's not continuing to be on top of every organization coming at them on their schedule of 36 months to get the actual credentialing information done. We've also seen consistency across plans and networks. If there's one way of kind of approaching a credentialing format or process, it just makes it simpler and more routine and higher quality, really, for all. What I'm saying here, we don't take away any of the, nor do we recommend taking away any organization's ability to do their own credentialing and decision making. But the fact that most organizations are looking to obtain the same amount of information, same types of information, and verify the same types of information, if that can be done one time in the information shared, that then benefits again from a provider abrasion perspective as well as a cost sharing. We have seen client and regulatory satisfaction. Simply stated, faster credentialing allows for faster network and enrichment, whether that is you've got a geographic need of access, you've got a specialty need of access. If you can do a faster credentialing process, it allows you to kind of fill that need or enhance that network much more quickly. We've also seen benefits to efficiency and outcomes of external audits. All of our credentialing is done with an NCQA certified CVO. Because we are consistent, because they're NCQA certified, whether the external audit is a state or a client, we are finding that, again, from a case study perspective, those audits are going on much quicker, much cleanly, and much more successfully. And Steve, the last slide, taking into account what I've kind of gone through, I do believe there's a lot of opportunities for workers' comp. Cost reduction, of course, I looked at some of the things before of ways that we can share in the primary source verification process. You're eliminating the repetitive functions of going back to that provider, each and every one of you, multiple times. And Andrew, I didn't interrupt your presentation, but I completely understand all of the things that you talked about, pain points, and going back and trying to get current information. Also agree with you that a provider may have multiple entities going out and updating their CAQH application, but people are really good about adding things, which is why we now have thousands of pages in a CAQH application, because addresses get added, but things don't get taken down. And that's just because we've got a lot of people touching it and trying to do the right thing. They want it to be updated. It's just a matter of making sure that whatever is not current, we get rid of as well. Reduce provider abrasion, which again kind of leads to improved adherence with the work comp regs in any given state or all states, reacting to what they need to do for you. If we take away the ability of multiple organizations reaching out multiple times for things related to credentialing, we do that one time, it allows them to be much more focused in, again, what we've seen is more willing to do those things that ultimately they need to do based on the product. We also believe in workers' comp. Standardized process eases some of the regulatory oversight. Yes, every state will have a particular piece of information they need or an accreditation that needs to be maintained on any given cadence, but at least if the overall process is the same, and then you look at what's needed to be different in each state, it allows, I do believe it should allow ease in that regulatory oversight to know that there is standardization on portions of it, and then be able to actually look at more of the things that are specific and unique to that state. Also, consistent quality standards. I know Andrew mentioned it. NCQA is very much the driver of what people look for in credentialing standards. Yes, there is a lot of gray. Julian and I have spent a lot of time trying to connect and have great conversations with NCQA on really what it means for credentialing, kind of, I don't want to call it the real world, but I think where we all believe is we want that high quality, but we want to also make sure that we can do it in a way that that is doable. Andrew mentioned a couple of things about some of the new requirements on attestation and updating anything in the CAQH application. That's a lot to be asked for. Credentialing data is key, and we can get that from there, but also we have the issue of directory information or modalities by location, the different things that are also needed for injured worker direction, as well as directory information. I think in general, all kind of falls under that administrative simplification. We're also, not that this is about directory information, but AAPAN is also working on some efforts there, because while the information could be different, we are all still trying to find that that best source of truth, which I'm not sure there's any magic golden bullet that's going to help us find that. But we do believe that as we look at it as an industry, we all have great ideas, independent states, independent organizations. But if we step back and look at things a little bit more of an industry, I think there's a lot of simplification and cost savings that we can do. And with that, I will call it an end and take whatever questions and or go from there. See, if this is one of my meetings, I would say there's a lot of crickets on this call. It's so quiet the entire time. Not one presentation had a question.
There are a few questions actually in the chat here. I think I see from Raji, is there a specific measure of success for accreditation/credentialing? Got it.
I'm sorry, Steve, at least in I lost part of it. So I'm going back to find it.
Okay. The question was, is there a specific measure of success for accreditation/credentialing? And has that measure changed over time?
I'm not sure what you're looking to measure as far as success. I can tell you that we look at audits on an annual basis of quality of the data, what needs to be verified, how is it going. So I'm not sure that, Raj, is what you're looking for, and I'm happy if you want to give clarification.
I can add a little bit to that. My measure of success, again, I'm using an NCQA certified CBO. My measure of success with that CBO is what percentage of requests am I getting back as complete versus incomplete. I think with a lot of the changes that we've made to our process, we're probably running a much higher completion rate than a lot of organizations. Directly back from our vendor, we're running 80 to 90%, repetitively month over month, where 80 to 90% of our requests come back as complete. That's not the issue. The standard is those incomplete requests. Why are they incomplete? Because now there's, to everybody's point, this is where that administrative burden really kicks in, right? Our vendor has made the outreach 3 to 5 times trying to get information. We don't stop. Just because our vendor was not successful, now we're going to be internally reaching out 3 times to try to get that information. That's the standard. That's the measurement for me, right? How many of those requests am I able to essentially turn an incomplete into a complete? And that's where better maintained data at the source would really be super beneficial to the credentialing process as a whole. And that in turn would help boost our measurements here with Coventry.
What I would add to that, Andrew, looking at it from that perspective, Blair, I do see your hand up. If you don't mind, because it's exactly what Andrew was talking about. Totally agree with you. If we look at measure of success that way, what we see is 96%. Every file that comes back is complete with all the information. And what I will tell you is that 4% that is not complete, 99.9% of the reason it's incomplete is because the provider did not respond. But what we are able to see, and I do think it's another benefit and kind of case study, is if your CBO is reaching out on behalf of more than one organization, that provider realizes that they could be reaching out for an organization that maybe represents 1% of their overall revenue. So just being realistic, the provider may not have the great excitement to jump up and down and say, I really need to make sure that I get this back to them for ABC plan. But if it's a plan that represents 50%, 40%, 90% of either that product line or their overall practice, they will jump on the chance to respond. So then you put together 10 or 15 different organizations and you're reaching out one time with a list of 10 or 15 names. Suddenly we've got a provider that says, oh yeah, I need to get back to you right away and provide that information. So as we looked at it over the last decade, the more organizations that are represented at one time, you do get much more response from that provider much quicker than, again, 10 organizations or 15 organizations coming at them separately. So if we want to look at it measure of success, I do also believe that that's a value of more of a standardized or shared, because not only are you only reaching out once and you're minimizing that abrasion, you're reaching out very strongly in kind of getting that provider to either, hey, you need to go reattest. I need an updated PLI. I tried to verify your education and you gave me the name of a school we cannot find anywhere. Please send us a copy of your certificate, your diploma, your whatever else it is. Or, yeah, we've looked up every alias name we know of for you, but that school does not know you by any of your married, divorced, whatever it is name. So is there some other name or another school we should be doing? So I think that's the value of doing it from that perspective. In one, you're bothering the provider one last time and you get much better opportunity of reply.
I agree. The only area that I would push back a little bit with is in theory, that source is already supposed to exist, and that is supposed to be CAQH. And again, that to me is, a large bearer of the problem here. I completely agree. Some of these providers will pick and choose which organizations that they respond to. But CAQH is reaching out on behalf of all of those organizations already. asking the provider to update your information to make sure that it's current so those organizations can use it. That to me is where the crux of the issue lies. We have a CAQH problem with their data, providers not being responsive, and that to me is really the area of biggest concern, because we all leverage that, right? And if we're going to put more processes in place, creating an alliance, CAQH is still reaching out for that information. Why are we not getting the responsiveness with CAQH from the provider community? I think that's the better question to ask.
Well, I think we've got CAQH, but then we also have, there's a CAQH application. There's 11 state required applications that kind of come in through CAQH. Then you've got CAQH putting their required application in more and more states. Legislation that's going on. We just added West Virginia in this month, and then California comes up in 2028. And also that's great for for belly buttons or NPI1s. I haven't even begun, and I see it in Andrew's smile, I haven't even begun to even include anything in here on your NPI2s, whether it's your provider groups, your clinics, your ASCs, because there isn't a standardized application out there. Even though we technically have CAQH for belly buttons, that even is a challenge. And then you start looking at that. I do think there's some opportunity over there, but I tried today to focus on NPI1s. And Blair has been very, very patient with that handout for a long time. Sorry for the Andrew Carroll show.
Oh, no, that's totally fine. I have quite a different perspective as far as measurements for success, as far as accreditation goes. Ours is really more about, like, are we able to bring people into our system and are we able to retain them, which are two quite different endeavors. Historically speaking, a lot, like, physicians weren't required to be accredited in order to work in the workers' compensation system. It was really just hey, this would be helpful for you to be able to be successful in our system. So it was more of a carrot than a stick. And looking forward, we will be shifting to more of a stick in that we have a change in which medical providers who want to work in the workers' compensation system, any of them, they have to be accredited. So our measure of success is going to radically change, because we used to need recruitment efforts, and now we should see people just coming to us without really any endeavors or marketing efforts from our end. So that's a huge change that we've got on the horizon here. In the past, we have also measured attrition. So are folks coming back and reaccrediting with us? Where do we see the most often time points of dropout? A lot of people, it's kind of a dichotomy of, we've got people who accredit once and then they don't stick with us, and then people who stick with us for the entirety of their careers, 20, 30 years. That has shifted some too, where with this level 1 accreditation being a requirement to work in our system, we're more interested in attrition of level 2 accredited providers, mostly because of the important value that they bring, rendering impairment ratings, especially when you consider rural parts of Colorado. There may not be a level 2 accredited provider, which sends a injured worker an hour in a car to go get an impairment rating. And that might not even be a one-time type of appointment, which is burdensome. So those are kind of some of our measurements of success, how they've evolved over time, and kind of where we're looking forward to with that as well.
And offer an answer to Raj. Raj, that was picking up on a couple of points in my slide of, if you have a standardized shared process that can be done much quicker, then it does allow the networks, the organizations, to fill those access issues, whether it is geographic or a specialty. Because if you can process a complete file in, let's say, 5 business days, the organization goes through whatever their credentialing committee process is. The network group, and I say that having come from it for many, many years, has a much quicker opportunity of being able to fill in that need, allow access to that injured worker, patient choice if you're in commercial health or government, but in this case, the injured worker. And the quicker, I think we all agree, that you can get a qualified person there to be able to take care of that injured worker, the better.
Yeah, and I would add to that, we see a lot of client requests, in various markets where the client is requesting to add a provider. And we understand the urgency of that, right? There is somebody that needs to see this provider relatively quickly. We are at the provider's mercy. We really are. We would love to get that provider credentialed, and up to speed, treating that patient within, the next 10 days. But the provider does play a big part in that, making sure that their data is updated and ready to go. I saw a question earlier. Tate, you had asked a question about how likely credentialing organizations are to integrate with others and prioritize work that doesn't directly drive revenue for them. Is there a clear business benefit? And, speaking from my position, it would really be unlikely because, again, we're not revenue generating here. And I think in the grand scheme of healthcare administration, credentialing has always got a little bit of a black mark because we're not generating revenue. We're actually spending that generated revenue. So from my perspective, it's not about generating revenue as much as it is cutting my costs, keeping my costs low. I don't want to be credentialing providers and taking on that cost for a provider that isn't treating in my network or might see one injured worker every 8 years. There's no cost benefit to me to spend that credentialing money on somebody who's not actively treating within my network.
I would add to that, though, Andrew, if ultimately organizations come together and you're only paying for providers that are in your network, but if you do have overlap or shared opportunity, one of the things that we believe in is the credentialing line in your budget is at least one line of your budget that should go down year over year because you have more and more people that are sharing in that one cost every 36 months. But at least you're only paying for your providers. But if you have that provider that gets shared, then over year, then instead of it costing you X level, it should continue to go down because there's more people kind of coming in and also getting it done quicker and getting provider to respond more because you've got more of those plan names or network names that are being listed.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I do want to mention I have experience with alliance models. I've worked with some alliance models in the past when we had commercial group health products as well. And it was a limited benefit at that time. The issue is it doesn't exist for work comp, right? We are such a unique product that we don't have a work comp credentialing alliance. Right now, most of the alliances I'm familiar with exist around Medicare, Medicaid.
I would just not an ad, but I would say that AAPAN does represent and include workers' comp organizations as part of our credentialing alliance. So and yes, I know that there are states that have Medicare, Medicaid, but basically we have the full realm of medical as well as full realm of vision, dental. Basically, if it's a provider type, one or two, it does have a place in our world.
And how many are you able to share how many providers you have within your alliance at this time?
Unique providers right now, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of 125,000. But I also will tell you that there are a handful of much larger organizations that we are in final discussions with and always growing. So again, not a sales pitch. If you want to talk offline, Andy, happy to do that. But we have seen over the years continuing to grow. And again, having everything from workers' comp, Medicare, Medicaid, vision, hearing, any different kind of specialty product line does participate in our alliance model.
All right. And I'm noticing we're at time. So I want to be respectful and seeing people drop off. But thank you all so much for these presentations. This was very enlightening. And I look forward to seeing you all at our next meetings at the convention in September. So have a great rest of your day and enjoy your summer and see you soon.